we did a walk surrounding writers of New York. Writing in New York has a very rich, long history of different people that have come to make it here as writers, people that have moved here after they've made it as writers. And there are so many writers that have a history and roots here that you could do an entire year of walking around and each week just talk about one writer.
Sure.
And you would still probably, I don't know, you probably need to do it for 10 years, you know, if you were...
At least, and then more writers are being made every day.
That's right. That's right. So what the cross-section of writers that we're going to talk about today, I would say is fairly arbitrary. We tried to visit locations where the homes were already in place, so that are still in place. There are some exceptions there. But that was one. It tried to have some degree of diversity in both the eras and sexes and racial backgrounds. So that is represented to some degree. But ultimately, as I just said, you really can't encapsulate the breadth and depth of all the writers that exist in New York. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot what we're doing. But we hope that you enjoy the ones that we did cover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it.
Let's get into it. I guess you're leading the way here. I was going to ask if we're starting in Brooklyn. You mentioned earlier that when I said it was the writers of Manhattan, there's also one in Brooklyn.
That's right. There is one in Brooklyn, and that's where we're going to start.
Perfect.
Yeah. So following along with the route that we devised for the week, we take the train from our home to the Grand Street L stop in Brooklyn, which is at the corner of Grand and Bushwick Avenue.
That's right.
And we walk just 0.2 miles or so down to where Betty Smith, who was the author of...
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn?
That's right. A Tree...
Ding, ding, ding.
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. The famous book that is often a joke, like, haha, a tree grows in Brooklyn? I don't believe it.
Or when you see a tree, it's like, oh, look, it's the tree that grew in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I feel like people told that joke to me when I first lived in Brooklyn, or anytime, when I first lived here.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a funny thing to say.
And now we have the Million Trees Project, so now the book should be renamed Million Trees Grow in Brooklyn.
Million Trees Grow in Brooklyn, that's right. Well, and I didn't really, it might have been that I just forgot about this, but I didn't realize now how close I used to live to that location.
Yeah.
So I used to live at the corner of Metropolitan and Bushwick, and we were only like 3 or 4 blocks from that. I mean, the Grand Street stop was sometimes the stop I would get off at to go home.
Yeah.
So just really, I don't know, half a mile from where I was.
But did you know until this week that that's where that was?
That's what I was just saying. I may have and had forgotten about it, but I just realized that was the case, yeah.
I think for some reason, like I remember reading that book as a kid and really liking it. And then not knowing as a kid, like the different neighborhoods of Brooklyn.
Right.
And then by the time I did know the different neighborhoods of Brooklyn, for some reason thinking it was somewhere further south.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know why, just thinking it was like maybe like near the Navy Yard or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any reason for it.
Well, the Navy Yard, that is a portion of Williamsburg potentially as well,
Yeah.
neighbors
I guess so.
at the South Williamsburg neighbors.
Yeah.
The neighbors, the Naval Yard.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, so a little bit, just some facts. We have some facts about all the authors, just the tantalizing ones I can pull. I can see Jesse is already trying to steal looks at my notebook, which is...
It's hard not to when it's right there. We're
Don't
talking about writers, and you're a writer, and I like to read your writing.
So, Betty Smith, The Tree Grows in Brooklyn is largely based on her experiences growing up, which I think a lot of people know.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know if it was initially kind of thought of that way,
Mm.
but she came to communicate that to people, as it got famous.
Right.
And it was immediately successful. Now, it came out in 1943,
Okay.
which, if you can think about when that is, that coincides with World War II.
Sure.
So it was extremely popular with soldiers overseas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I think probably a lot of people that resonated with their upbringing to some degree.
Yeah, probably.
And I mean, although it was probably the soldiers that were overseas were maybe a generation younger, but ultimately
How old
the
was she
idea.
when it came out?
I'm not 100% sure, but she was writing about her childhood,
Yeah.
so I don't.
Well, did she grow up in the Depression? Is that when this was based, or was it just that she was
think
an
it was-
immigrant family and it was because they were poor? That was the whole
Yeah,
point of the story, basically. I mean,
think
it
it
wasn't
was-
the point of the story, but it was like that was the main focus of the story was that they were really poor
yeah, and it was.
and their community was poor. But
And her father was like a dreamer, but he was an alcoholic, and
Right.
like
Right.
it was like I think it was broken up into 4 books, and it's like different sections of her life growing up for like a period of 2 years, I think.
oh,
And so yeah, I can't 100% remember if it was during the Depression or not. I think the recollection I have was that it was just like they were going to be poor regardless if it was Depression
right.
or not Depression.
Yeah, I think it was more that they were immigrants.
Yeah, but I think,
Okay.
I mean, the same way that it resonated with us as kids, I think it's an easy read and
Yeah.
fun, and
Yeah.
probably people saw their upbringing in it in some way
Yeah.
too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think even. Sorry, this whole podcast is just going to be about this one book. I think even as a kid that didn't grow up like that, really at all,
Yeah,
there still was something that resonated with me.
yeah,
Just about, I think something just about like recognizing that life is a struggle at a young age.
hmm
And like this is written from the perspective of a child,
yeah,
noticing these things and like finding joy in like the small things, but also being aware of the larger struggle.
mm. Yeah, maybe.
And it like a lot of times you don't, as a kid, you're not thought of someone that can understand these bigger concepts. And I think reading about other kids that do understand these bigger concepts like made me feel seen or something, or like made me feel like, oh yeah, some like other people get it too.
Yeah, sure. I think that makes sense. I don't know I mean, that's a consequence of it being prescribed to you in school as well.
Yeah, I did also have to read it for school.
So she ended up writing 4 novels,
Okay.
and the first 3 of them were set in Brooklyn,
Oh,
and they were all the same kind of autobiographical vein. I guess that was kind of her thing.
yeah.
And the 4th one was set in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I believe,
Okay.
and that was her experience going with her husband while he was going to college, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, that was the breadth of her novel experience. Again, the first one was like immensely popular. The second one was not as popular, and then the other 2 didn't receive the same traction. But I mean, the first one was enough for anybody to be,
Yeah.
a household name.
Totally.
There were 2 movies and a Broadway musical made about A Tree Grows in
Oh,
Brooklyn.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the first movie won 2 Oscars.
Wow.
Yeah. One child actress it was a special back when they had awards for kid actors.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Okay.
explicitly. And so the person that played her, I think Fanny. I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think the person that played her won the Oscar.
Oh, cool.
And then the person that played her dad, supporting actor, won an Oscar as well.
Huh.
Yeah. And so as far as the actual building itself, which we have footage for all the buildings, it is under renovation currently.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a porta potty in front and construction workers coming in and out.
Yeah.
But I believe it to be the same building still. It is a nice building. It
Yeah.
has an impressive facade, and looks like there's a restaurant on the first floor now, or something
Oh
going on.
yeah.
It's like wood
It has
paneling,
that. Okay.
a wood paneled facade as part of it. But yeah, it made me wonder if part of the selling point of it was that it was the Tree Grows in Brooklyn house or not. You know?
Yeah, I wonder. It's interesting. I mean, with this whole thing, I feel like this might be the first one where a lot of our landmarks are kind of just these random apartment buildings.
Yeah.
That, like, some of them have plaques, which I guess we'll get into, but that one didn't have a plaque, right? And the ones that don't have a plaque, like, you don't know what it is unless you know what it is.
Yeah.
And because there's so many writers, like, they've lived in places just like we've lived in. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many buildings in New York that have, if they're older than like 50 years or something, like they've probably had some famous people living in them to some degree.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't even know if I would, at first I'd say like any real estate person worth their salt would like know this, but like, I mean, you would have to be maybe totally ignorant to like not know something like this, because it's like people, if you talk to superintendents or whatever, like this information is something that would, and then you leverage
you Google
that.
the address at some point and it
exactly,
would show up.
just once,
Yeah.
and then you use that to sell the,
Right.
you find somebody that's
probably.
interested in that, because 700 Grand Street does not have a book that millions of copies were sold about it.
Right.
So,
but at the same time, then I also don't know how many of these are landmarked, and so part of it, like, you might sell it under that if someone cares, or you might just be selling it because of the location and someone's like, okay, I don't care, I'm like just going to renovate this building and rent it out as condos.
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's hard to know. Depends on the realtor.
Yeah.